Okay. Well, welcome to season 3 of Changing the Game. I'm your host, Jennifer Hensley. I'm excited to be here with you today. And as part of our NM Facebook marketing winning group, we want to bring you some Lives Leader Summit qualifiers that have their eyes on forum and are seeing a lot of success in what they've been doing from a marketing perspective that have been helpful to them. So over the next 2 more webinars that we have, you'll be hearing from some of our top producers as they share some of their experiences. So today, and actually I want to mention, if you missed our last episode with Charlene, you'll want to make sure to check out that webinar. It was fantastic. And I think there were a lot of great takeaways that I've heard from everybody that's really resonated with them that they can use right away to see more impact in their practice. If you aren't listening to us live, we will make sure that this recording gets out and you can share it with those other people in your network office too that you feel like would get value out of this episode. And remember, in our in-between weeks, we're going to have open office hours on on Wednesdays at noon within the Facebook group. So feel free to hop in there or send your team in there. They can ask the questions of how do they take the ideas that you're getting today and move those into execution? How do you actually get them done? So if you've been with us for the last 2 seasons, we're going to dive into our topic in 10, and then we'll open it up for questions. So make sure that you're putting those questions in the Q&A today or drop them in the chat and we'll answer those when we get to that time. So I'm excited to be joined here by Rachel James. We were just catching up and so excited that we were brought together and introduced. I think her story is really powerful and the impact that she's made in such a short period of time that you don't have to be in the business for dozens of years to really get off to a fantastic start and see a terrific impact and go a different route. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. So Rachel, thank you for joining us. I'd love to turn it over to you to share a little bit about, how do you describe when somebody's saying, what is it that you do? How do you introduce yourself and explain that to people?
Yeah, and thank you, Jennifer. I'm humbled and honored to be among peers and friends and share my experience first and foremost. But to kind of answer that question, how I describe what it is that I do, I think comes largely in part from my passion around the blue collar community. So in short, in essence, I do financial planning for the blue collar community, but I usually add a little bit more color to it and talk about the history of myself and why I'm so passionate. So for me professionally, I actually started out as a mechanic early on in my life. And through a weird course of events, right, I just followed this, path and journey where I was sort of a student of the industry and learned and had really fortunate opportunities along the way to work with a lot of great companies. And a few years ago decided that I would kind of switch gears and support the blue collar community that had raised me in essence by helping them all plan for their own futures. Because I was a B Tech, let's face it, I wasn't that good. So, but math has always been a strong suit. I've always been kind of interested in finance and interested in numbers. So I really started to lean more into my skill sets. And since I sort of made that transition, it's been my mission to provide financial wellness and education to every member of the blue collar community, however I can.
Well, I love that for so many different points. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what, challenges and things that led you to make some of that transition and why you decided to pivot a little bit in your business. But one of the things that really stood out to me and what you talked about is, connecting with people. You get it. You understand what they've been through. You've lived that world of being in the blue collar industry yourself and everything. So you get them, but yet you've had some of these experiences that are unique and different that bring some expertise that they maybe don't have in their lives. So I think that really helps to connect you with them in a meaningful way to get them to open up and say, I want to hear what she has to say. So tell us a little bit from a marketing perspective. I mean, you're pushing towards forum. We were just talking before we started the recording that going to be number 1 in the East, or you're right there on the verge. So tell us a little bit about, from a marketing perspective, what are 1 or 2 things that you've done that you feel like has really helped you to be successful?
Great question, Jennifer. I think it's really been leaning into that. I am not, I think, what people think of when they think of a financial planner. When they look at my resume, they definitely don't think that, right? They're, it doesn't all, the dots don't all connect. And rather than shying away from that, I've really chose to lean into what makes me different, mostly because I think we are in a position of being a trusted advisor. And a lot of the work we do comes from a relationship of trust. So the more genuine and authentic I have been with people, the more connections I've made. And it's just been an easier process to connect with prospects and people that I want to meet with, because I'm very transparent that I am different. I'm not like cookie cutter what people think. And it doesn't work for everybody, but for those that it does work with, we have such an instant connection because my path is a little bit different and a little unique. And I think what's interesting for everyone listening to this call, or people who are kind of trying to find their own, path, we're not a piece of paper. We're not two-dimensional. We all have so many different qualities and traits and interests that we all have. And rather than separating it, leaning into what makes you different and unique, I think it helps create those trusted relationships that much faster with the people you meet. And for me, it was just very easy to kind of lean into coming from blue collar roots and supporting those people, because I have a motorcycle and I go to the drag races and I'm interested in the same thing. So it rather than not including that in who is Rachel James, I just added all, like, here I am, face value. If we're a fit, that's great. And it's going to be awesome. And if we're not, that's great too. There's so many other people that are different from me that might be a better fit.
So when you think about that, what were some of the things that you've done to take that messaging and incorporate it in so that you can make that connection to people? Was it through different networking, your messaging online? Tell us a little bit more about how that has been, kind of pushed out to your audience to reach them.
I think part of it comes from volunteer work, right? I donate a lot of time to the vocational schools, the blue collar community schools, to try and help youth figure out their path, right? Because it doesn't need to be one. My path has certainly been very different and had a lot of different iterations to it, but I like to support from the ground roots there. I belong to a lot of associations. Just as a volunteer member, whether that's, automotive associations, construction associations, plumbing, et cetera. I try to get involved in as many as I can. And then I strategically kind of looked at, okay, what does my image look like on LinkedIn? And what does my headshot look like on my website? And I chose to have my headshot done in an auto body shop with, a blazer and a t-shirt it's a Holley carburetor equipment t-shirt underneath the blazer, because it's a connective thing that most people would look at it and not realize that t-shirt has that significance. But for someone coming from the blue collar trade, they'll see that little sliver of the t-shirt in my profile and go, oh, I know that logo, that's Holley. And it was a subtle way to kind of connect with people. I edited my website and I made it very clear and defined about, the associations and the charitable work I do to give back to the blue collar community. I identified them clearly in my webpage, like right when you land, it's very clear who I'm looking to meet with. My LinkedIn profile, all my headshots everywhere are all the same picture. That way it's unified. If you find me in one place, you've got me somewhere else. I hired a marketing company. So maybe right after COVID hit, which I think was a significant impact for me, right? I was used to doing in-person meetings pre-COVID, and like everyone else, was forced to sort of reevaluate what my new role was going to look like. But it forced everything to kind of go digital for me and for everyone else. So I realized that the power of having some marketing, whether that's brochures or infographics or whatever, needed to be in line with what my messaging was, because I wasn't always going to be able to do it in person and convey it that way. So I hired a third party, marketing company. I worked with compliance. I, went through the proper channels and got some customized documents that really spoke to the people that I want to meet. So rather than, an image of a doctor or an attorney in a suit, it was a technician or a wrench or a car, or things that were a little bit more palatable, so that my marketing spoke to the people that I want to meet with. Because at the end of the day, that's who I want to meet with.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine that a lot of the resources that you found with that were available to you were speaking more to different markets than what you were going after. So rather than just utilize that, it sounds like you found a way to say, how can I still do this in a compliant way, but in a way that really fits who I am and what my clients are going to see themselves in.
Yeah. And I thought, if it were me on the other side of that, and I was interviewing and looking for someone like myself, I would want something, catered to, I would want to have some sort of connection with the materials that I was given or the energy that I was receiving. And it was important to me to really make it so that that connection was there. And it was sort of, I did realize that my practice was different. I think the more and more I continue on this journey, I'm realizing, wow, I'm really different. And it's okay. And there are ways to unify that and really embrace what's different rather than shy away from it.
So I know one of the questions before we even get to question and answers we're going to have is, how did you make that pivot? I'm sure that wasn't always easy when people would tell you maybe there's not money in that market, or that's not where you should be, like this is the way to do it. How did you decide to like make that pivot, and really what impact has that had for you once you leaned into that was the space that you were going to go all in on?
Yeah, I think for sure. When I first started, I kind of was like, all right, I'll help everybody, no walls, I'll just generic, we'll kind of go down this path. And the more I was helping people, I realized that the people I loved to help were the blue collar people I had always worked with forever. Those were the conversations I was having that I really felt. I was laughing in my meetings. I was joking around. My energy, like taking a temperature of how I felt at the end of those meetings. I was just more me, and I was having more fun. And it felt like talking to a friend, even if it was me meeting them for the first time. So part of it was just realizing what made me happy. And just, kind of following that path.
It's like we were talking about before of like being aware of your energy before we started recording, and like where that is, that sometimes we can get looking at things and saying, well, where does my biggest revenue come from? And that may not be always where you're most excited and where you can have the most impact and have the most energy of building your practice in the future. So I love that advice, everything. So we always want to make sure that with our audience that are a lot of times, just kind of newer advisors similar to yourself and everything, but are trying to get to that next level, maybe haven't broken through as much as you have at this point, of what's something that they can really implement in their business in the next couple weeks to help them get started. If they might be struggling with this of like, how do I discover maybe really what my true market is, or how do I get over that hesitation maybe to lean into it and be successful and not feel like they're maybe alienating than all these other people. What advice would you have with them on what's one thing that they can really do to get started in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two parts to that resonate to me. And the first part is, you would think by doubling down on a certain target market that you'd be excluding other markets. But just because I target and work with so many blue collar people, it doesn't mean that I don't help other professionals in other areas. Ironically, because I've been so focused in one lane, there are other people that I do meet by chance that I love to help as well. And I make it to some degree clear that like I will help anybody, right? But it hasn't been limiting in any way. So I would take down the walls of that assumption that by targeting a market, you're going to somehow exclude yourself from other opportunities. If anything, you're just making it more clear. At the end of the day, we're all trying to prospect and meet new people. And by making it really clear for everyone else of who exactly it is you want, it just becomes easier for people to help and support you. And it may be their version of what you're articulating might actually be a little different than how you see it in your head. So you'll wind up getting other people. But as far as takeaways and things that people could implement, I probably say this phrase like too many times, but the Hawthorne effect is kind of a cool study that I think changed the way I viewed the practice. So it was a study that was done in the early 1930s, and it was around an electrical company where scientists observed the employees of this electrical company in the early 1900s. And what they realized was that when they were observing the employees, their behavior would change. and that they were actually altering the state of performance, and they were altering production of this, particular business. So I've internalized that philosophy, that thought, that effect into how can I translate that to my business. So I would encourage those to kind of take action and start measuring and monitoring and observing your own practice. Whether that's looking at your blue book, looking at your reports, looking at, your inventory, but also observing how you feel at the end of the week. Like at the end of your Friday, however your weeks are structured, whatever your ideal calendar looks like, take a pulse of, if you haven't found that spot for yourself that you feel most fueled and fired up and really excited about, take a pulse at the end of the week and look at the people you've met and what really got you excited. What are you still thinking about? Who are you really excited to meet with next? Or even thinking through, like, if there was no restriction and nothing could hold you back and you could work with anyone in the world, what would that be? What books do you read? What hobbies do you have on the weekends? What things, do you find yourself watching on TV? I take sort of a self-discovery assessment to really kind of figure out what lights you up.
I love that. It made me think of, I think the book was like Designing Your Life or something along those lines, using design theory that so many people, now is very common in a lot of engineering, computer engineering fields and everything, but using it in our own lives to think about our energy and our engagement and where is that high in both regards, that we can apply to make sure that we're doing more of that, where we can show up and bring our best self to our work. Because I think more and more people too are looking for, they want to have authentic experience with you. They want to feel like they're connected to who you are as a person as well, that's part of really your branding. So I love how you're bringing that together. So one last question we have for you is, and then we'll open it up to questions, is, who are some of the other people that you look to as role models or people that you're trying to emulate, that might be other people that people in this group could really benefit from learning about their journey and what they're doing, that's really, or things that you try to emulate or take and incorporate into your practice as well?
Yeah, the list is long. There's a lot of really talented people everywhere, which I think is what I'm so surprised to discover, is how so many people take this in totally different directions, right? Patrick Scott out of Florida is doing something really special. Just a cool practice. He's redefining how things are put together. We often have conversations about what he's building. Junior Coleman, same thing, just doing some different things with his own practice and how he's designing it. Josh Cohen and Phoebe Story have built a really cool practice and partnership that's very unique, and their branding is just fire, absolutely spot on. Doug DeServo and his team, Century Hill, they have a fantastic platform. Everyone, I think what's cool is that you can learn something from everyone, from the largest to the smallest practice. There's just so many different ways that you can organize this and structure this and attack it, if you will. But those are, I guess, some of the names that just immediately come to mind of people that are really creative and thinking about things in a unique way.
Yeah, I love that. And that gives us, our audience opportunity to reach out, learn more, check out what those people are doing online. That's a great thing, that so much is available to you either there, or I know so many people like yourself are really open and receptive to say, reach out to me and how can we help, which is one of the most fantastic things I think that there is too, is everybody's willingness to give back. So we're going to open it up to questions. So hopefully you've had some time to think about what you need assistance with, how we can help you today and everything. So you can put those in the chat or in the Q&A. So you can start putting those in as you're thinking about those. One of the things that I'd love to hear a little bit more from you, Rachel, about is, just how you mentioned that you had some assistance. You decided it was worth investing in somebody to help you with your marketing, but I know you're really early on in the business, and most people, they're, at that point, you're just starting to maybe come off of some of the early incentives that you have. Your expenses are already starting to increase in the business. Like, how did you just come to that decision to say, this is worth the investment to go ahead and do this now, and not to wait maybe till year 5 or year 10 to do that?
I think One, it comes from having both feet in, right? And not having one toe in the pool and out. I've had significant conviction since day one that this was going to work and this was going to be, what I wanted it to be. And I truly view this as operating a business. Um, and and I think in order to get more out of this practice, we have to reinvest back into it. It's the same reason why I've hired staff and trying to reinvest in different ways, because ultimately as one person, I just can't, I don't have the bandwidth to work that many hours in a week. And sometimes it's just easier to hire someone, in my opinion, that has that skill set. I think I have good broad ideas, but I am not a marketer. I could never do it. That's not, that's not my skill set. I can't do it. Same as, having an admin person or having different people or having a bookkeeper or having a CPA. You can do everything. You just can't do it all at once and all by yourself. So I viewed it as more of an investment in my practice that I knew would be something that could last, right? Like everything we built could potentially last for a decade. So if we amortize that cost over a decade, like it really wasn't that much, because it wasn't going to be gone in an instant. These were tangible things that were being built that I can keep in perpetuity if I want to. I mean, I'm sure at some point they'll become outdated, but it wasn't a transaction that was going to be fleeting or go away. So I viewed it as just sort of an early on investment that I could, lean on and build off of over time.
Wonderful. We do have a question about working in that blue collar market. It looks like it's around, how do you reach that market when, we talked about your online presence, but, are they really online, or how have you found ways to connect with them? Is it LinkedIn or Facebook, or, have you found some creative ways to reach that market?
I would say they're not so much on LinkedIn. They're not on social media. That's not typically the space to find them. Association meetings really can be quite helpful. Every industry, every business has, trouble spots, has things that plague their industry specifically. And that doesn't matter whether you're medical, blue collar, attorney, whatever industry you're working in, every industry has some sort of problem that plagues them. And I find that going and attending to association meetings helps you learn the pain points of those businesses so that you can be more relatable quickly. And by going to these association meetings, you learn, I mean, it's great networking. You can meet all sorts of new people, but even more important, you can learn the problems that these industries face so that you can be really relatable early on in that, phone call or whatnot. Technicians, laborers, support staff, like that's, finding good employees is a problem everywhere, right? I think at this point, it doesn't matter where you work, everybody
Right.
needs help. So I think that's a great topic to kind of talk through to some iteration and sort of customize it to whatever segment of business you're trying to get into. But I would say to start learning, the more you know about that targeted market you're trying to get into, that has nothing to do with planning, right? Just maybe a new product, a new widget, a new something, some new legislation, some facet of the industry that's changing for people. You can either bring it to their awareness if they don't know that it's happening, or you can talk about something that they want to talk about that they're interested in learning as well. So that would be my angle into meeting those types of people.
Yeah. And that makes me think about just the fact of going back to, or we were saying, like getting niche and being really specific. If you're trying to serve everyone, it's really difficult to get to that level of depth of understanding their pain
Mhm.
points or what's changing in their environment or with their company or things like that when you're spread out so much versus leaning into, I'm going to really own this one space. Not to say, like you said, that you can't serve other people, but you can clearly tell how you are able to separate yourself from so many other people in that space.
Yeah. And even if you wanted to work with sales professionals, perhaps there's certainly some advisors that I've met that have created pockets for themselves in certain organizations, and they've learned the handbook, they've learned all the benefits, and then you're creating a repeatable process. So you're creating a system that you can replicate over and over and over again. So it one makes it easier for you to plan for people, but also helps you really connect deeply with people very quickly.
Okay. And we have time for one more question. So if we didn't get to your question or you weren't here with us live, make sure what you can do is just email Jennifer@playmakercoach.com and I'll get back with you, or Rachel will follow up and make sure that we get that answer to you. And you certainly, once again, can join those office hours next Wednesday at noon, and we can go more in depth there as well. So let's take that last question. It looks like our question is a little bit more about just how you manage your marketing. And you've said you've hired some people, but with the marketing, you kind of outsource it. Tell us a little bit about why you chose to outsource versus hire that directly within your team.
One, compliance. I wanted a company that understood the logistics of what we could and couldn't do, and that was not in my wheelhouse. I had no idea, so I'm like, someone else can do that.
Mhm.
And just time management. I think there's only so much time. My efforts really need to be on the practice and building that and helping clients. I just don't have the bandwidth to be, cutting and pasting images and trying to formulate publisher. I don't even know what tools they use, but like, I don't have time to learn that or to put it into place. So, the decision was mostly based on time management and skill set. Not
Well, that
having.
we appreciate that. Hopefully that answers the questions. And like we said, if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to send that in and we'll make sure to address that. One of the other things that we have for you today too, if you're trying to decide like, well, where do I get started? How does this all fit into me? Is we'll put it in the comments as a link to the score assessment that you can use to help kind of understand in your marketing space, where might you start? Is it with some of the associations that might be the biggest impact for you? Is it speaking engagements? Is it social media, depending on your market, where you might want to start with some of your efforts. And one of the things that I believe is that really ties in with what Rachel talked about today is starting with understanding the problems of your clients and who are you speaking to. And I think the more that you are crystal clear with that, the rest of your marketing is going to become so much easier when you get that part of it down. So thank you again, Rachel, for joining us today. As a thank you, Playmaker Coaching and Consulting, we'd like to be able to donate to a cause of your choice. So is there an organization that you're passionate about that we can support today?
You know what? Alex's Lemonade.
It's that month, isn't it?
Yeah.
So perfect. I'd love to be able to do that. Such a great cause. And I know all the work that NM is doing to help support that organization is fantastic. So like we said, the resources for today is that score assessment, and we'll send out the recording. So if you're not with us, you can access that, go back, listen to it again. There's so many great nuggets that are in here that you can do. And then that try it at work tip around the Hawthorne effect. That's a really great concept that I think a lot of people probably haven't heard of. That'll be a way to think about how they can move forward with their own marketing to help them impact their business more positively. So we know that, human nature is often to say, well, we can do this later, or I'm not ready yet. I'll do it when I get to that next milestone, but there's never the right time or the time where you feel like, oh, I've got the right money to make that investment. So that's why we're here. That's why these resources are here for you. Make sure, jump on those calls, leverage that opportunity in the office hours to stop in, get your questions answered, take that step forward. So one final thought for you today is to think about this: is the time is now. Now is the time to take that next step. Now is the time to do the things that other people aren't doing. Now is the time to embrace you and that niche that you can be known for. Now is the time. So we'll leave you with that. Thank you again, Rachel, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Have a fantastic week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.